Is expensive chicken actually worth it? Or is it all just hype? So we're going to take a deep dive and find out, see if there's really anything behind those higher prices.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? We kind of just take chicken for granted these days. I mean, it's everywhere. But there's a whole lot going on beneath the surface, science, ethics, and maybe even some like culinary secrets.
Right. And get this, chicken used to be a luxury. Like imagine that. Your everyday poultry was once a special occasion thing. It's crazy how things have changed.
Yeah, it really says something about how our relationship with food has changed over time, how it's produced, what people think about it, the whole thing.
So you sent us two main sources. First, there's a transcript from a video. It's like a fried chicken sandwich showdown, putting different chicken breasts to the test to see how they do under pressure.
Uh-huh.
Literally, like underbreading and all that. And then we have some chapters from a book. This one gets really into the science of chicken meat.
Perfect combination.
Yeah, right?
You see how those scientific theories play out in a real-world taste test? And then we can, dig into the why, figure out the science behind what makes some chicken better than others.
I'm already hooked. So the big question is, does more expensive chicken really mean a better eating experience? Is it just taste?
Mhm.
Or is there more to it?
Exactly. What makes quality chicken? Is it just personal preference, or is there some scientific way to tell what's good and what's, well, not so good?
So let's start with that fried chicken sandwich showdown. The video compares a $3 per pound chicken breast with a $9 per pound one. Quite a difference.
Right, no kidding.
And the first thing they noticed was the size difference after frying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the cheaper breast, like puffed up in the pan before cooking, all big and impressive. But after it was fried, it shrunk down like crazy, like a little raisin.
Haha. That's wild. Yeah. Sounds like a case of water weight to me. Cheaper chicken sometimes has a ton of water in it, and when you cook it, all that water evaporates. So you end up with, well, less chicken.
And get this, one of the sandwiches was a total soggy mess. The bottom bun was completely soaked.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was bad.
That's the problem with all that extra water. It just ruins the whole thing.
So the video basically said the pricier chicken held up much better.
Not surprising, honestly, but we need to, look at the science, figure out why one chicken breast did so much better than the other.
Okay, time to get into that science. These book chapters are like packed with info on chicken anatomy and how it's processed.
That's where things get really interesting. You start to understand how, like, the way a chicken is raised and processed affects the actual structure of the meat, like down to the muscle fibers and everything.
Yeah, so from what I'm reading, it all comes down to those muscle fibers, like the way they're arranged and how much water they hold.
Right. It's like comparing a tightly woven fabric with a loose one. The tightly woven fabric will be stronger and won't tear as easily. Same with chicken. If the muscle fibers are tightly packed, it'll hold its shape better during cooking. And that means it'll be juicier and tastier.
Makes sense. So that explains why that cheap chicken in the video basically deflated. But what about that soggy bun?
Well, it's probably a few things. Like we said, the looser muscle structure means more water gets released when you cook it. And the book also mentions that water chilling can make the problem worse.
Wait, what's water chilling?
It's how they cool down the chickens after they're, processed. They basically dunk them in big vats of cold water.
To prevent bacteria and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is the chickens absorb a lot of water during that process, sometimes like 12% of their weight.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
Yeah, and it all cooks off, leaving you with a smaller, drier piece of chicken.
And a soggy bun.
Exactly.
So what's the alternative?
Well, there's air chilling. They basically cool the chicken down with cold air instead of water. It helps the meat keep its natural moisture, and you get a drier surface. Perfect for getting that crispy skin.
Interesting. But this book goes even deeper. It talks about different types of muscle fibers, white versus red, and how they affect the texture.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. So chicken breasts are mostly white muscle fibers. Those are for quick bursts of energy, like when a chicken flaps its wings. They're leaner and have a different texture than the red muscle fibers you find in thighs and legs.
So are those white fibers the reason why chicken breasts can be dry and stringy sometimes?
They can be, yeah. Especially in modern chickens that are bred to grow really fast. Their white fibers are larger and looser, so they don't hold water as well, like a sponge with bigger holes.
Okay, so it's not just about taste. We're talking about like the structure of the meat, how much water it has, how it's processed. All of that affects how it turns out when you cook it.
Right, exactly. And the cool thing is, if you understand the science, you can cook chicken better. Choose the right kind,
Yeah.
fix any problems you might have. Basically, become a chicken master chef.
Okay, I'm listening. But before we get too carried away with cooking, let's get back to the book. One thing that really stood out to me was this whole discussion about what happens to chicken muscle after, the chicken is processed. Apparently, it's not just sitting there.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So what happens?
It's called rigor mortis. Basically, the proteins in the muscle fibers start to bind together, and the muscles get stiff, like really stiff.
Like a clenched fist.
Exactly.
So the chicken is getting tense even after it's, well, not alive anymore.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
But how does that affect how tender the meat is?
Well, over time, those protein bonds start to break down. There are enzymes in the meat that do that naturally. It's a slow process, but it makes the muscle more tender.
Oh, I see. So it's like a battle between the muscles getting stiff and then becoming tender again?
Right.
But what determines how fast that happens?
It depends on a few things, like what kind of chicken it is, how it was raised, even how it was chilled.
So does that mean that slower growing chickens, like the ones raised on pasture, would be more tender because they have more time for those enzymes to work their magic?
Most likely, yeah. Slower growth usually means the meat becomes tender more gradually.
Okay, so rigor mortis is a big factor. But we've also talked about water content. How does that fit into all of this?
Well, obviously, water is important for keeping meat juicy, but it's not just about how much water there is, it's about how that water is bound within the muscle fibers, and that changes during rigor mortis.
So it's not just quantity, it's quality.
Right. If the pH of the muscle drops too quickly after the chicken is processed, the water can get pushed out of the fibers, and that makes the meat drier and tougher.
Oh, so pH is important too.
Yeah, it's like a gatekeeper for moisture.
But what affects pH levels?
Well, surprisingly, how the chicken was raised and processed can affect it. For example, stress can make the pH drop really fast.
So even the chicken's emotional state can affect the meat.
In a way, yeah.
That's crazy. It seems like every little thing matters.
It does. It shows you how connected the whole system is. Like, even small things can have a big impact.
Okay, so we've got rigor mortis, enzymes, pH levels. This is getting pretty complicated, but let's bring it back to the kitchen. How can we use all this science to cook chicken better?
It's all about choosing the right cooking method for the type of chicken you have.
Okay, so let's say we're working with a chicken breast that's, a bit tough. Maybe it's from a fast-growing breed or it wasn't handled very well after processing. What's the best way to cook it?
In that case, you want to cook it low and slow, something like braising or slow cooking. Give those enzymes time to work their magic and tenderize the meat.
I like giving it a spa day.
Exactly.
What about grilling or pan-searing? When you cook it over high heat for a short time.
Those methods are better for chicken that's already tender, like from slower growing breeds.
Got it. So what about marinades? Can they help to make a tough chicken breast more tender?
They can definitely help. Acids, like in lemon juice or vinegar, can break down some of the proteins on the surface. And salt helps the meat retain moisture.
So it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
But you said earlier that marinades work better with some types of chicken than others.
Right. If the chicken already has a good structure and pH, a marinade will make it even better. But if the meat is already kind of loose and watery, a marinade won't fix that.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So what about flavor? People say that some types of chicken taste more chickeny than others. Is that just a matter of opinion or is there science behind it?
There's definitely science involved. Things like the breed, the diet, even how the chicken was processed can affect the flavor.
So a chicken that's been pecking around in a pasture eating bugs and stuff might taste different from a chicken that's been fed corn and soy its whole life.
Exactly.
And processing methods can affect flavor too.
Yeah, air chilling tends to preserve more the natural flavors. Water chilling can make the flavor more diluted.
It's amazing how much goes into it.
It is. That's what makes food so interesting.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different things, but there's one more thing I want to touch on. The ethical and environmental side of chicken. I think people are becoming more aware of this, and it's important to understand how the choices we make affect the world.
I agree completely. It's not just about what's on our plate. It's about the whole system behind it.
Right. So where do we even begin? What are some of the things we should be thinking about when we buy chicken?
Well, one big issue is how chickens are raised in industrial farms. These birds are often kept in crowded barns with very little space to move around. It's not a very good life for them.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bad. And I've heard that they're bred to grow so fast that they have health problems.
That's true. They often have leg problems, heart problems, all sorts of things.
Like their bodies can't keep up with how fast they're growing.
Right.
So are there alternatives?
Yes, there are. Pasture-raised poultry farming is a much more humane and sustainable option. The chickens get to roam around outside, eat a more natural diet, and they're generally healthier.
So it's better for the chickens and better for the environment.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I'm guessing it's more expensive.
Usually, yes. But it's worth considering. It's about making conscious choices about the kind of food system we want to support.
I agree. It's not just about getting the cheapest food, it's about making choices that align with our values.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, but before we wrap up, I want to talk about the future of chicken. What do you think the future holds for this bird?
Well, I think we'll see more advancements in science. That could lead to more efficient and sustainable ways of raising chickens. We might even see new breeds of chicken that are better adapted to different climates or have more nutrients.
That's cool. And what about the ethical and environmental side of things?
I think consumer demand for higher welfare standards and more sustainable practices will continue to grow. People are becoming more aware of where their food comes from and how it's produced.
So we might see more labels and certifications that tell us how the chickens were raised.
Exactly. And I think those labels will become more detailed, giving us information about animal welfare, environmental impact, even nutrition.
So it'll be like a chicken's resume.
Uh-huh. Yeah, something like that. And with more information, consumers can make better choices. They can support producers who are doing things the right way.
I like that. It's about giving consumers more power.
Right. And I think that will lead to a more conscious and compassionate food system.
So it's not just about changing how we raise chickens, it's about changing how we think about food.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that food is more than just something we eat. It reflects our values and our relationship with the world around us.
And it's about realizing that even small choices can make a difference.
Exactly. The future of chicken is in our hands. We can create a better future for this bird by making conscious choices and demanding better practices.
We're back. And honestly, after going through all this stuff about chicken, my whole view on buying chicken has changed.
It's pretty amazing, right? Like, you start with something simple, like a chicken breast, and suddenly you're learning all this science and ethics and cooking tips.
I know. And I keep thinking about that fried chicken sandwich test. It's crazy how obvious the differences were between the cheap chicken and the expensive chicken. Like, frying them really showed how they were different?
Yeah, for sure. Frying is a pretty intense way to cook.
Right.
High heat, quick cooking time. It really tests how the chicken holds up.
Yeah, like survival of the fittest. Chicken edition.
Aha, exactly.
That cheaper chicken with all its extra water and loose fibers, it just couldn't handle it.
No, it fell apart.
Soggy Bun City.
Ugh, yeah. But the expensive chicken, with its tighter structure and all, it came out perfect.
Crispy and delicious.
Right,
So it's not just about frying, though, right?
right.
It's about understanding how heat and moisture work together.
Exactly. And no matter how you cook your chicken, you got to know what you're working with.
So if you're grilling chicken, what should you look for?
Well, grilling is high heat too, so you want a chicken breast that's not too watery. Look for air-chilled chicken, or maybe brine it yourself beforehand.
Okay, makes sense. And roasting.
Roasting is a bit more forgiving because the heat is lower and more even, but a good quality chicken breast will still turn out better.
So basically, buying better chicken is like an investment.
Yeah, you're less likely to mess it up.
But not everyone can afford to buy the fanciest chicken all the time. What if you're on a budget?
That's totally understandable. You can still cook amazing chicken without spending a ton. It's about being smart. Choose wisely and use the right techniques.
So even if you're buying regular chicken, you can still make it taste great.
Definitely. Brining is your best friend, honestly. It's cheap and easy, and it makes the chicken so much juicier.
What about if you can only find water-chilled chicken?
No problem. Just pat it dry really well before you cook it. That'll help it brown better. And don't forget to let it rest after cooking. That way the juices can redistribute and it'll be more tender.
Like a little chicken siesta.
Haha, yeah, exactly. When I was reading the book, I was really struck by how much the author talked about the history and ethics of chicken farming.
Yeah, me too.
It's like he's saying we need to look beyond just the price and the nutrition.
Right, there's a whole bigger picture.
It's not just a piece of meat, it's a whole story.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's making people more interested in things like sustainability and animal welfare.
Definitely.
Like we're rediscovering how important it is to know where our food comes from.
And how it was produced.
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices that align with our values.
So to bring it all back to that question we started with, can we create a better future for chicken by focusing on quality instead of just price?
I think we can. It's a challenge, for sure.
Mhm.
But what if we started thinking about chicken as something special, something worth investing in?
What if we supported farmers who are raising chickens the right way?
Yeah. Maybe we'd see a comeback of those older, slower growing breeds,
Yeah.
and people would start cooking chicken in ways that really let the flavor shine through. It would be like a whole new way of thinking about chicken.
Exactly.
So next time you're at the store, remember all this stuff we've talked about
Think about the chickens, the farmers, the planet.
and your own taste buds.
Yeah, of course.
It's about making choices that you feel good about.
Your choices really do matter.
They do. It's not just about chicken, it's about creating a better food system for everyone.
A system that's good for the animals, good for the environment, and good for us.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. So until next time, everyone, happy cooking.